news, people are more concerned than ever about privacy. Parents are rightfully concerned about data mined by schools and then used to track or profile their children. Cscope is a computer-based service capable of gathering personally identifiable information on Texas students. Contracted vendors are located outside the state of Texas. In Friday's Longview News Journal story, you were described as being puzzled over concerns of data mining. A recent amendment to the Federal Family Education Rights and Privacy Act indeed allows third parties to gain access to student data without parental consent. As our elected State Board of Education member, do you know for certain that there is absolutely no sharing of information about Texas public school students with third-party vendors or quasi-federal agencies through Cscope or other means? If that is the case, please cite upon what controlling legal authority or statute that you ensure us that Texas students are protected from such data sharing and profiling. And I would remind you here that if the federal government didn't know that it could get the data from Texas public schools, why would there be an exception to that law?
Yeah, thank you for the question. There's no way in the world I can guarantee anything in 1,000 school districts with hundreds of thousands of teachers and 5 million kids. To try to even do so is laughable. What I do know is the only people that have username and passwords in Cscope are teachers. Children are not given, students are not given electronic access to Cscope. If they are given electronic access to the lessons, that's done by the teacher or that district. Cscope contains zero student data. So this is yet another example of misinformation designed to scare you and you about your kids in the public schools. It's just not true. So I don't know what the NSA is doing or not doing or what other vendors are doing, but
Mr. Elba, I'm getting a couple of notes from people listening online. Some people aren't listening online have a little trouble hearing us. You're a little closer.
Okay.
How's this?
We'll do mic take here.
Let me say it again real, because this is an important one, because this is putting fear in the hearts of parents unnecessarily. Cscope only allows electronic access by teachers. Students do not have electronic access to Cscope. Any fears or accusations of data mining are false, and it's fear-mongering designed to scare parents. And that's one of the biggest misinformations that just popped up last week in the Longview paper. And they quoted Mason Moses from the Cscope Collaborative that said the same thing I'm saying. Students do not have electronic access to Cscope, period.
First of all, I didn't think the government was eavesdropping on the telephone. I didn't know the IRS was going after good conservative Tea Party groups and citizens. I didn't know the government was reading my email. And so while, Thomas, I agree, at this point in time, there's no evidence of that. I'm very concerned about the future. And that is why we are looking at this whole online learning process. Because we are getting away from textbooks, as you know, and going online. We have to have checks and balances of what's in our classrooms. Students have to have the best educational materials, and parents have to know what's being taught. And I continue to stand here, and you gloss over it. You gloss over the fact that for 6 years we had a program that we know. Again, I'm going back to the facts. You can have your Dropbox, and you can have any article you want. But the facts are the facts. That public entities cannot begin nonprofit or for-profit businesses. And when I asked the question, did you ask the legislature for permission? They said no. Did you ask the Attorney General for an opinion? No. Did you ask a private lawyer? Yes. Do you have an opinion? No. You should be concerned about that as a steward of our tax dollars and our education. You should be concerned that for 6 years teachers could go to jail if they showed a parent what they were teaching them. You should be concerned that Cscope for 6 years was violating the law by putting what parents were entitled to have for free behind a passcode protected wall. You seem to act as if that's all fine.
Well, I as a parent was never denied access to anything in my child's classroom, and I have 2 students in my family that attend a Cscope school today. Never once been denied access.
Wait a minute, back up. When did you get a password?
I never asked for one. That's not my job. My job is to set standards and to trust teachers to do that.
When your students...
Senator, this is the discussion partner. I'll jump in for a second. And Joanne's saying that you're not really answering...
Either one of
you are answering the question. But let me throw one thing in, which is, you say that Mr. Ratliff says that he's acting as compliant, but he did say that he would give you credit for having pressed and got some things changed. So it's not really saying that he was fine with those things. He's saying it's good that they changed.
No, he said he'd give me credit for getting the teachers off the hook for going to jail.
Right. He did not say that's fine.
But what he did acknowledge is that Cscope was set up inappropriately with public tax dollars. What he hasn't acknowledged is that the Attorney General has concerns about how millions of dollars were spent. He says, oh, we'll have an audit. Everything with Cscope is after the fact. When we would come up with a failed lesson or a flawed lesson, they would say, oh, we took that down. That's an old lesson. Every time we caught their hand in the cookie jar, oh, we stopped doing that. And remember, folks, Cscope was taken out of the schools, not by legislation, but by the Cscope board of an 18-2 vote on their own because they realized what a mess it was for students. They wanted to I thought I responded. If I didn't, I apologize.
Joanne, what was
help
the
me
part
better
of
understand the question?
Thank you for being answered.
I'll be happy to help both of you,
Sure.
gentlemen, because I know you want to answer my question.
Sure.
So let me
I thought we did,
kind
but
of
go
take
ahead.
you through this. First of all, students don't have to have access to Cscope for that data to be mined. Okay? It can come through the teacher's evaluation of the student and then the school district's overall profile of the student. So let me read this to you again. A recent amendment to the Federal Family Education Rights and Privacy Act allowed third parties to gain access to student data without parental consent. Now, this has to do with the Recovery Act and the federal stimulus funds, which Texas took those funds, okay? So I'm trying to get you all to focus on this. The federal government says we can access this data, and Texas took the federal funds, so that means the federal government must be expecting Texas public schools to share information with them. So I'm saying if it's not through Cscope, if it's through another means, you, Senator Patrick, as chairman of the Senate Education Committee, and you, Mr. Ratliff, as our representative on the State Board of Education, I, as a taxpayer and a parent, are asking you to assure us, and if you can't assure us, then that should be on your to-do list, both of you, to assure us that we are not having our children tracked. So please focus on, do you or do you not know whether that is true?
I'm going to have each of you respond to that briefly, but I would say, in fairness, he said that he can't do that. He did answer your question. He said that he can't do that. So Mr. Ratliff, go ahead and respond to that.
And I did say that Cscope, teachers take lessons off of Cscope and print them out and hand them to students. So unless there's a Xerox machine in the sky that I'm unaware of that takes those and mines that data, I can't tell you what the federal government does or does not do. My job on the State Board of Education is to pass standards and approve instructional materials. That's it, as it pertains to the classroom. I don't think Senator Patrick could guarantee you what the federal government's doing or not doing.
No, and I tried to, Joanne, I wasn't trying to avoid your question. What I was suggesting is that as of today, I'm not aware, and if there is something that we need to be aware of, we will learn it. But as of today, I'm not aware that there's data that they can mine. But what I also said was, I'm not going to turn a blind eye to it and say, you know what, this is just fine. You know, the federal government's never going to look into our child's records. I'm very concerned based on what we just learned in the last 60 days about what the federal government is doing. So I think we need to be sure that doesn't happen. But as of today, I don't believe it's happening as of today, but we should protect it so it never happens.
We were just here, May 20th, celebrating the work of parents across the state of Texas and the elimination of Cscope's content. The curriculum was looked at by parents all over Texas for years, and they were calling for either the correction of it or the elimination of it. And at the time, on May 20th, we believed that Cscope was going away for the very simple reason that they said it was going away. ESC 17 had a representative here, and they said, Cscope is gone. Please feel free to pull down SB 1406, Representative Toth. It's gone. Well, my concern then, and I probably share the governor's as well, is that we weren't convinced that they were on the up and up about it. And sure enough, here we are at a press conference that we really shouldn't have to have. Cscope should have been gone. You know, it was just a day later that I received a call from Mason Moses, who represents, I believe he represents ESC 13 and Cscope, and he said, you know, this whole issue of Cscope has been a red-hot poker in our eye, and it's gone, and we'd appreciate it if you could just put an end to the rhetoric. And I responded by saying, Mason, if it goes away, the issue will go away. If you guys follow through and the content is put to bed and it goes away, the issue will go away. This past week I met with an ISD board member, and he said to me, Steve, we can't use Cscope in our district now. And I said, well, sure you can. The only thing that went away is the content. The curriculum is still there. And he goes, you don't get it. I mean, we can't use it. And I said, why? And he said, the amount of blowback over the past couple weeks because of Thomas Ratliff from the State Board of Education over the continued use of it has created a lightning storm for us in our district. We are getting calls from parents. We're getting calls from teachers. Teachers don't want to identify themselves, speaking out against Cscope. I thought this problem was put to bed, and I said, well, you know, honestly, this is a content that was developed in a very peculiar way. No one knew that it was being developed. It had been out for 7 years. It had been out for probably 5 years before anyone even knew about it. Teachers were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. They were forbidden from telling parents what was in it against Education Code Title II, Subtitle E, Chapter 26. Parents were not allowed to see it. Marcia Farney, who sits on the State Board of Education, sat on the State Board of Education at the time, was not allowed to review it. The chairman of the State Board of Education, Barbara Cargill, was not allowed to have access to it. And I said to this guy, I said, this is of their own doing. This is a problem that they've created, and now Thomas Ratliff is trying to keep it alive. It's a mess. Folks, we're here today because one individual on the State Board of Education is trying to keep Cscope alive and trying to keep the issue alive. And that's the only reason that we're here. Microsoft and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they are big proponents of Race to the Top and Common Core. And the architects of Cscope and its foundation has always been Common Core, delivered through an e-based learning portal. And Mr. Ratliff is an advocate, and he is a paid lobbyist for Microsoft. And yet he sits on the State Board of Education. Surely anyone can see the conflict of interest. And Mr. Ratliff either needs to step down from the State Board of Education, or he needs to leave or relinquish his lobbying responsibilities with Microsoft, because there's clearly a conflict of interest that he needs to address for the betterment of education across the state of Texas.